Welcome to the Lawyer Life podcast, where the personal, professional, and political intersect. Each week, we discuss a topic to help ourselves and other lawyers navigate our days with a little less stress and ideally a lot more fulfillment. On today's episode, we're talking about the 2019 World Champion Toronto Raptors and about how it's important that lawyers are always learning. We're joined by our guest, Pam Hrick, today, and I can't be more excited. My name is Mike Anderson.
And I'm Darlene Tonelli.
Darling, they won the championship.
As promised, we're announcing what happened with the NBA Finals on the Lawyer Life podcast for anyone who missed it. Yay!
This is, if there's ever a time to just celebrate and be happy and talk about a team that did an amazing thing, this is the time to do it, the day after the Raptors won the championship.
Well, and much like all other lawyers, we had planned a more weighty topic to discuss today, but all discussion will be about the Raptors for the first little bit, although not completely unconnected to lawyering. We're going to talk about the things to take away from the team's win and the things that we think can be applied to lawyering, yes?
That's exactly right. And we're also going to talk with our featured guest about why it's important to always be learning. So the two things come in together really well. And with that, I will introduce our guest, Pam Hrick. An old friend of mine. She's now a lawyer at Stockwoods Barristers. She's on leave currently to do her master's at NYU, which she just completed. And her special interests include privacy, violence against women, and feminist litigation. And on the Raptors point, talented athlete as well. So Pam, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike. Hi, Darlene.
Welcome. Nice to have you. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me, especially on such an exciting day. My wife and I, we found a bar here in Brooklyn, which is where we're living for the year, where we've been taking in all of the Toronto-related sports things that have been going on, the very short-lived Leafs run, and obviously the much longer and more successful Raptors run. And it was amazing. It was amazing last night. We ended up, finding a group of other Toronto Raptors fans. One guy had brought out his Canadian flag to the bar, and there was just a lot of excitement. This city has been waiting a while for a sports championship, since 93, and this has just been something really, really special to watch.
Yeah, this has been so much fun. And one of the things that surprised me, like in watching this run and the way it's all gone, I've been watching like the post-game interviews, and the Raptors, a lot of them have been teaching kind of life lessons I found like throughout the playoff run. Like for example, Kawhi Leonard, and I think Kyle Lowry talked about this too, when asked, how are you handling the stress of being in the NBA final? They both talked about the importance of family, that they have their health, and general personal life, really looking at what's important to them instead of focusing so much on their job and their identity as a basketball player and a potential champion. Pam, did you notice any of this? What, do you have any thoughts on the way they've been positioning their perspective on all of this?
I totally noticed those comments, and as somebody who is raised by a single mother, the comments from Kyle Lowry and the sort of the perspective that he brought about the efforts that his mother made and all of the sacrifices that she made to raise him and give him all of the opportunities that he's had. He talked about that stress. That's something to be, worried about. And here I am. I've got basketball. I play basketball for a living to provide for my family. The rest is sort of icing on the cake. And I think, bringing that perspective about what's important in life, having that broader outside of just the occupation that we have as lawyers is something that's really important to our mental health and how we practice law as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other things I picked up in watching this playoff run that I think we could apply to our everyday as lawyers is taking a look at Coach Nurse and how he really innovated and he was flexible, and he, as things changed and evolved, so did he. And one of my favorite examples of this is
for sure
during the series, he basically, he used a high school style defense, like a defense so simple in nature that they don't run it in the NBA at all. And barely ever in college, called the box and one, because he realized that it would be effective in a certain situation when there's only one star player on the court for Golden State. And he was ridiculed and people laughed at him. They called it janky, but the fact of the matter is it was different and it was new and it worked. And the stats bear out that it worked really well. So sometimes simpler is better, I think. And Darlene, do you have any thoughts on what we can take away from the innovation we saw with Coach Nurse?
I was just having a discussion with a lawyer earlier this week who had started his own firm back in I guess, the early 90s, when it was much less common to leave a big firm and move into a small firm. And he was mentioning that he had a lot of people saying, oh, it'll never work. And what are you doing? And, you're crazy. And I mean, the trajectory of his career is so interesting. And we laughed because I said, oh, well, the first thing that happens when you have a good idea is people laugh and you have to like push through it, or people naysay, or they throw up all these obstacles. And it really is just part of the process. And I think that we're seeing someone come in against unimaginable odds. Almost, what I love about it is almost not knowing that, I don't know, like lack of thinking everything can be a huge strength. So maybe he thought he did know everything, but the strategy was not the common one that people would use, and that's what worked.
Yeah, and it was surprising, and most of all, I think effective. And the last lesson, there's many others, but for the purposes of this episode, the last lesson we can take away from the Raptors playoff run this year, I think is, and probably one of the largest narratives that the Raptors had, is load management. So you had the star player, Kawhi Leonard, the Raptors get in the offseason. He was away all the year before with a leg injury. And so the Raptors put together a plan with him to make sure that he could be sustainably playing at a high level throughout the season, and really with a view to make sure that when it mostly mattered, the playoff run, he was going to be in a position to be 100% healthy instead of hobbling along after putting in too much effort during the season. And, we talk about this often on the podcast, that sometimes it's tempting as a lawyer to be running at 100% all the time, effectively sprinting throughout every day to try to get as much done as possible, as many hours billed, be looked at as productive and, wonderful lawyer, that oftentimes we link those things together. But in the end, taking breaks, spending time with family, spending out time outside of work, that sort of oscillation that we've talked about, can actually position us to sustain and perform better in the long run. And look at Kawhi Leonard, star player, NBA champion, who just didn't play a bunch of games in the regular season so he could actually perform at the highest level when it mattered most. So some great lessons there. Thank you, Toronto Raptors, for this really special thing.
I also think that the other final thing is, speaking of children watching, I think that kids right now see so much ugliness in the media that I'm really shielding my kids from a lot of what's out there. And I think that what was so interesting is my son, who's 4, he watched the after. We were watching the highlights this morning, and he watched the part where the Raptors are going and hugging the other team. And he said, that's so great that they hug the other team and that the other team doesn't mind that they lost. And I thought they might mind. But I really like that he noticed that. And I do think that the sportsmanship at the end of the game anyway was awesome. So something to focus on. And then the other final thing, sorry, one more thing. I'm not usually, two final things. As people who listen to this podcast regularly will know, sports is not always my main thing. But I do think that there's something to be said for lawyers here about defining yourself as a team that can win, and understanding how to unite around winning. And I think in Canada, I would say we have a complex of just defining ourselves as the ones that don't win for a lot of the year. And I hope that this changes things. Certainly, as Pam mentioned, there's another team that could use a little bit of a fire lit under them that are Canadian. So maybe they will take a little bit of a lesson from this. Because I think up until now, this is sort of about defining your standards, but I think there's been a long standard of getting into the first round of the playoffs for the Leafs and thinking, okay, our work here is done. I hope next year they kind of push past that. What do you think, Pam?
Oh, I totally agree. I was thinking about this as the Leafs were going down in Game 7 of the first round again. It hasn't been since 2004, since you and I, Mike, were in undergrad together in Ottawa, that the Leafs have gotten past the first round of the playoffs. And it seems like this, sadly insurmountable obstacle, which, I'm cautiously optimistic that we will overcome, next year's the year, as we, commonly tell ourselves. But there's definitely there's a lot to be said about creating a culture and expectation of winning, both within a team and also within a sort of broader, within the city as well. I think that a lot of what sport has to offer at its best is this ability to bring people together, to create excitement, to allow the things that divide us, the opinions that divide us, the stuff that you're talking about seeing in the media, Darlene, and shielding your kids from, letting that fall away and really uniting around something that is something that we can all commonly be excited about.
And we talk a lot on the podcast about diversity. And, last week's episode with Catherine Chang was about belonging and how to cultivate a sense. And I think two things about watching the fan reaction to this. First of all, very diverse, bringing together a lot of people. The team itself brings together a lot of very diverse people from all over the planet, really, to find a way to unite, to win together. And I think the fan reaction has been great. And for me, if I was a professional sports player and I had previously seen the Air Canada Centre full of fans cheering for me, and then I saw the Jurassic Park, We the North, streets full of people, I would be pretty interested in upping my game to get to that level. I think that we can do this more broadly. So anyway, I'm always inspired by winning.
You'd probably also be more inclined to sign a new contract with the team that you were playing with that would allow you to spend more than one season with that particular team, right?
Right. I think we need to stop and say something to our number one fan, Kawhi Leonard. That's right. I know you love this show and please stop with the mail. It's too much. But if you want, if you really want us to continue to podcast this wonderful Lawyer Life podcast for you, specifically Kawhi, just sign with the Raptors. And as long as you sign with the team, we will continue to deliver this content to you, our number one listener. I know you love this show and you're listening right now. And that is no problem, buddy. Guaranteed, we are locked in. How does it sound?
Don't see how he can refuse. Locked it down, Mike.
Especially today. He has nothing else to do today. He must be listening to us.
Out of any NBA player, I feel like Kawhi might be the most likely to win an NBA championship and then wake up the next day and listen to a podcast, because he's his own person and I love him for that. But anyway, okay, Pam, we asked you on the show today, not only because, of your Raptors prowess and your athletic background, but also because you made a really interesting decision when it came to your career. And so there you were at Stockwoods practicing for a number of years. You had clerked at the Supreme Court before that. And then you decide that you're going to try something new and do your master's at NYU, taking a step aside. So can you walk us through that whole thought process, how you came to that point?
Yeah, well, doing a master's of law was something that has been in my mind for a few years now. So when I was finishing clerking, there was sort of a fork in the road. It was either go and take this opportunity to do this LLM or take this opportunity to go and work at this amazing firm. And for a number of reasons, I chose the second path. I chose this opportunity to work at, I think, one of the best litigation firms in the country. I don't regret it for a minute. And I got into I think it's my third year of practice, or I was just about 3 years in. And I was sort of thinking again about, those reasons why I wanted to do the LLM in the first place, to have a chance to think deeply and consider areas of law that I find really fascinating and important, and to maybe have a break from that day-to-day hectic pace of private practice to let myself do that. And so I made the decision to throw my applications in again, and I was fortunate to get in. And I was also fortunate to have the support of my firm in taking this year off to do this thing that I think is both going to, well, I can say it has now because it's actually been done, this thing that has allowed me that space to think and research and write about areas of law that I find fascinating. And for me, one of those was tech-facilitated violence against women and how the law is responding to that. I also had the opportunity and went into it thinking I'll be able to broaden my expertise in areas that the firm practices in or that I specifically practice in. So, for example, media law. One of my favorite experiences here at NYU was being able to take a course on mass media law with a man named David McCraw of the New York Times. He's the Deputy General Counsel of the New York Times. Some people might remember him from during the 2016 election, writing this letter to Donald Trump talking about after Trump's lawyers had threatened to sue the Times for publishing allegations from women about Trump's abuse and harassment of women. He wrote this letter that went viral and basically said, part of the allegation of defamation, you have to prove that it's harmed your reputation. And let's be honest, Donald Trump can't do anything more to none of us can do anything more to harm Donald Trump's reputation with his treatment of women than he has already done. So bring it on if you want to sue. And having him and all those war stories that he was able to tell, in addition to learning more about the American side of defamation law, was deeply enriching in my professional life.
And are you alone in the class as someone who was practicing law before, or is there a bit of a mix?
No, there's been a mix. There's a mix in the master's program here. NYU has a particular focus on making its class truly international, and you get a lot of people in the class who have had a few years of practice, and some of them are looking to have a hook to write the bar here and to become accredited to practice in the U.S. And some of them are on their way to a PhD or a JSD. But it's been a good mix of people who are purely students and people who have got that life and practice experience, which really enriches I found really enriched a lot of the discussion and the experience here.
When you were making the decision to step away, I think, we've talked about it on this podcast and other episodes, that sometimes it's really easy to, because of the nature of our jobs, kind of get stuck in the here and now and not see beyond, the next deliverable or next file or, the next week or the next month and to look outside of our everyday. How were you able to do that, revisit that, that goal that you had when you finished clerking and see the forest from the trees and understand that, taking a step away doesn't mean that, your career is, ending or anything like that, which I think some people might worry about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't know that every firm would be as wonderfully supportive as the one I've happened to end up at, and that was part of it. Knowing that my job, my space at the firm would be there when I came back, had something to do with my decision. But just in taking a broader look at things, it was a good time in my career and in my life to go. Once you get, if your ambition is to become partner at a law firm, the further that you go into your career, the closer you get to partnership. And once you get into partnership, the harder it is to take that year off and really have a seamless reentry back into your practice. That's a real consideration from a life perspective. I'm not a young kid anymore, but I've also still got some flexibility in my personal life to be able to take an opportunity to kind of uproot myself and have this experience of living in New York, which in itself as a whole has been a whole incredible experience, being able to live the culture down here, especially as someone who's a bit of a theater nut, to understate things. Knowing that I had the opportunity with my wife and her career as an artist to pick up now and not have to worry about a whole lot of things being left behind. Taking the experience when it comes along, when you have the opportunity to do it, and knowing that you have the rest of your life to practice law as well.
Well, and something I was going to ask you about, we talk a lot on the podcast about the ways to be the lawyer of the future, like the ways to keep yourself sharp, the way to contribute. And I do think that with the state of the world, we have to be really serious about what are we doing and how are we best contributing. And I'm very interested in the topic that you chose because I do think that there's a lot of work to be done there on the legal side, obviously. And I think having worked with, like, Mike and I do sort of in-house style work with all kinds of companies, but tech companies are certainly one of the areas that or one of the types of company we work with. And we do see a lot about, what happens when you don't take that time to step out and sort of assess what should happen is that things just happen and no one sort of proactively thinks about the future, or there's no template. Sometimes the law takes a while to catch up. Do you think that this background that you've got is going to help you become a better lawyer, help shape the law? Are you going to write about it? Like, when you went into this topic, what were you thinking would be the outcome aside from the life experience, which obviously is huge, and we've talked about that on the podcast too. But where do you see it coming into your practice when you come back?
Well, I hope it'll inform my involvement in some of the firm's broader privacy work. We have this amazing digital privacy expertise. A lot of folks in the firm are practicing in that area. I have for a long time, and Mike, I think, knows this about me, given our long history. I have always been passionate about. I've always been passionate about ending violence against women. I also have this passion and interest in privacy and having the chance to think about how those two things come together in a digital age. I think is going to give me some additional tools that I can use as a litigator to help advance the law and how it addresses these emerging and, in some cases, entrenched issues of how technology and violence against women intersect. So I think that's gonna let me do more in that area. And I just think too, having the chance to have learned and reflected on a broader range of issues in the law will also add to the different perspectives I can bring to a problem that I get put on my desk as a lawyer, and think more not just more creatively, but also have a broader understanding of the backdrops that exist against which we have to solve and tackle these legal challenges.
Well, I'm always sort of interested in this idea that there are always new fronts on the battleground, so things get won in a traditional context. So people understand that, hate speech is bad. Okay. And then a new platform opens up and it's like, oh, just kidding. All of the rules are suspended and we're going to wait until there's a huge problem with misogyny and hateful speech online. And then we're going to say, oh, new problem that we should take some time to solve. I see it. And I think as a woman who has a somewhat public presence at this point, and understanding what other women are saying who are in that position, there's certainly, it's a new form of something to be aware of. Like, I think the things that female politicians are going through online in Canada is just totally appalling. And I do think that there's something to be said for, women in particular, for this particular point. Speaking out is always scary. And then now there's all this pressure that, is baked into the online platforms that you just kind of have to agree to roll with until it changes. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you looked into as part of your thesis work or your coursework?
I mean, that's something I've been sort of looking into or been aware of for quite some time now. You look at some of the emerging issues. I'll give one specific example. I'll talk about deep fakes, which there are congressional hearings going on down here about the impact of deep fakes potentially on democracy. And a couple of scholars named Daniel Citron and Bobby Chesney have written a really good paper on this particular issue. And you talk about how the manipulation.
What it is, just quickly, for people who don't know.
Yeah, for sure. So a deep fake is basically a video or image that has been doctored to make it look like somebody's doing something that they never did.
Right.
If you folks go Google Barack Obama and deep fake, I think there's a video that'll come up that kind of illustrates the phenomenon. So putting words in the mouths of people, or the more problematic origin, more horrifying origin, is those are being used to make it look like women were engaging in sexual activity in which they had never engaged, and that those deep fakes are being distributed to harass and abuse women. And so this has been a problem for some time, but it's not until it has been raised in the context of the threat to democracy and elections that we now have congressional hearings going on down here about, oh, what is this? What is the impact of it? I think a lot of the abuses that you'll see in technology, you can find those technologies having been deployed in really problematic ways against marginalized communities before they sort of reach this mainstream kind of critical massive attention being paid for it. So I think we need to you need to keep in mind that the ways in which these technologies are being deployed and who they're being deployed against, and when we start paying attention to them.
And I find too that I'm seeing, I mean, with the deepfakes issue, I think that there are readily available tools that permit the making of deepfakes. Like, this is not a really difficult thing. I think some major platforms offer the ability to do that. And it always starts from this premise of, oh, it's good. Look at this technological advancement. But it's actually not that complicated to put in some pretty reasonable restrictions and to enforce, especially at the level some of the platforms are at now. They do have the resources to enforce these things should they choose to, or should the pressure be high enough on them to do so. And I think you're right. The election stuff, I mean, even just the recent video that seemed to imply that Nancy Pelosi was slurring her speech and looked drunk. I mean, these are really problematic items because people believe what they see on video. And I can tell you, having worked with tech companies, where at the time that we make assumptions about what people know about technology when we live in big cities and have all kinds of access to technology or talk about it as part of our jobs. But I mean, it is really not well understood that you can make a video look fake or look real when someone didn't actually say those words. And I think it's just something that if there isn't an understanding about it in the first place, I find that sometimes these things are hard to explain. People don't understand. They think that the freedom to make an interesting new technology trumps people's rights to not have, threatening content. I mean, these videos are used to threaten people as well, with reputational harm and things like that.
Yeah.
Which is just a traditional form of violence against women, taking a new, more mass format. I think that's kind of, for me, when I look at these things, it's coming out of the homes, really. I mean, domestic violence as an issue going back many years was not such a public issue. And now you can take a domestic violence issue and make it a job issue, a reputational issue, even blow it up much bigger than the possibility was before because of technology. So I'm interested to know if there were solutions being discussed at NYU with all the brains in the room, because I feel like we're getting awareness of the issue, but where do you see the solutions coming from? How should people who are interested in focusing on this type of thing direct their attention?
I mean, that's the $1 million question, how we deal with these sorts of things. And I think we're seeing between the congressional hearings here, and there was an international hearing with MPs and other elected members, I think recently in Canada as well, starting to talk about, okay, how do we regulate, or should we regulate these platforms on which these types of videos can be distributed? And that is a question that involves balancing freedom of expression issues and equality issues, which are much more equality rights, which are much more well grounded in Canadian law than in the American system, just by virtue of how their laws have developed. I don't have a sort of bottom line answer about what we do about this, but we look at the harms that it causes. I think, as a general matter, we look at who those harms are caused to as part of discussing this and bringing more attention to these issues. We look at building communities of lawyers and scholars who are doing work in this area, who are proposing innovative solutions. One of Daniel Citron's proposed solutions has to do with the immunity that intermediaries have in the United States under something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which basically removes liability for platforms like Facebook and Twitter for third-party content that is published there. And she's proposed basically adding something of a reasonableness requirement for addressing that kind of harmful conduct before platforms will be able to access that immunity. So if they're taking reasonable steps to keep this kind of stuff off of their platforms, then they can have that immunity from liability. And we talk about these proposed solutions, and we keep moving forward and keep building public consciousness, because I think, as you said, Darlene, we've made strides in the areas of dealing with domestic violence, bringing that out of the darkness into the light, understanding better that it's a public issue, not merely a matter of domestic relations behind closed doors, and we have to shed the light on and build support for among the broader population addressing these issues, because I think law that doesn't bring along the hearts and minds of people in society is not going to be particularly effective in addressing these really serious issues.
I mean, I think the thing that you're, showing us is that going out and deciding to further educate yourself doesn't only have a great personal benefit to you, as I think you've communicated, but as well can drive a huge public benefit. And it's clear that you're well positioned to help so many people now avoid the terrible circumstances that we've discussed. Not to get too heavy here, but sometimes it's tough to look at the way that information is being used and the way that we take in information generally, and to have informed experts who can speak to an issue, as you said, to include people's hearts and minds is a really valuable and necessary thing right now. So bravo to you, not only for taking a very personal step, but a step that so many people are going to benefit from.
Yes, agreed.
Were you going to say something, Pam? No?
Oh, I was just going to say that. I was just going to say thanks, Mike. Thanks, Darlene.
That's what it set you up for. There it is. Okay.
I got there eventually.
We're going to go to a quick break, and then we'll be back with our goods and gripes. The Lawyer Life podcast is brought to you by Inter Alia Law. Inter Alia lawyers have big firm training, in-house experience, and a wide range of expertise in technology, media, and entertainment. Our advice is business-focused, speedy, and practical. To learn more, visit interalialaw.com. That's interalialaw.com. And we are back with our goods and gripes. Goods are things we want to promote and support. Gripes are things that annoy us. We have a guest today. So guest first, as we always do when we have folks over for dinner. Pam, do you have a good?
Yeah, I have a good, and it's in the spirit of this being Pride Month, and as a member of the LGBTQ2S+ community as well. My good has to do with the stories of the histories of our communities being told in popular formats now, and I'd want to highlight two of those. One is a podcast called Uncovered: The Village, which has been done by Justin Ling of CBC, which tells the story of the men who were murdered by Bruce MacArthur and hooks that into a broader history over 8 episodes of the community's relationship and oppression historically by the Toronto police. It's amazing the detail with which Justin has told this story, and it's really important, I think, for people to hear. And then the second one is this FX series called Pose, which premiered last year. It's just started its second season, but it's I think the first television show that is telling the histories of the ballroom cultures in New York City in the late 1980s and early 90s, and the stories of racialized and predominantly trans women and their fights, their contributions to the advancement of communities, and the joy in which they were living their lives at this time of incredible oppression. And seeing those stories told in popular mediums is a good and something we need a lot more of.
Bravo. I know on that note too, my good, I think I've mentioned the show before, but a former coworker of mine, Dan Levy, co-created a show called Schitt's Creek with his dad, Eugene Levy, that many people know. And it continues to get, I think, increased attention, which is so well deserved. And a lot of articles recently have been focused on Dan's contribution. His character is an LGBTQ individual, and there's an amazing scene. I think it's the second season or the first season or third season or some first 3 seasons, where he explains his sexuality by describing it through wine, which I think it was just so beautifully done. And he said, sometimes I like white, sometimes I like red wine, sometimes I like rosé, and sometimes I like a Merlot with a Chardonnay label on it. I like the wine, not the label. And I loved the way that he so put it. And it's very befitting of how his sexuality is treated throughout the show. And it's an incredible show. And it's really neat to see somebody who I used to sit a couple desks away from doing so well. So that's a good on the content side for me too.
Wow. Those are normally I'm the one with the sort of politically large goods. And today I'm a little bit on the more Mike style goods and grapes. I was going to say as my good that I participated in my first school fundraiser for my son's school. This is new because I'm new to being a parent that goes to schools. And I just have to say the things that schools do to make these kids come out the other side as good human beings, I'm floored by it. I'll actually maybe even tweet. There's at the stairs at my son's school. Between each riser of the stairs, they say like, drink water, meditate, be kind to others, do yoga. This is amazing. This did not happen when we were kids. And it's just all, when you walk in, there's always a quote on how to, treat others with respect, and everyone is different and everyone has different strengths. And it's just such a beautiful environment. It's a public school. It's nothing fancy. It's just, this is the curriculum that they're teaching them. And to be around all of these parents, moms and dads, investing a lot to make their kids have this great fundraiser thing that we did last night was just quite something. And to the theme of this podcast, there's a mix, right? Like there's some really heavy stuff happening right now with the world. And then there's some really great stuff like the Raptors. And I feel like things are going to be okay with kids if they keep learning this stuff early. So that's my good.
Awesome.
I love that good.
Yeah. I don't think I have a grape. Pam, do you have a grape?
I have a number of gripes, Mike, but I know you're limited in podcast airtime, and at the risk of taking us, but to take us, back into the dark place from which Darlene was trying to, pull us out of. I want to highlight a gripe of a political nature, which is related to my good. But while we've made so many strides and there are so many things to celebrate during what's become Pride Month now, my gripe is that not everyone in our communities has benefited equally from those advancements, and my gripe specifically is that trans folks, and specifically trans women of color, continue to struggle and continue to face oppression and harassment in numbers far outstripping any other members of society, and we still need to fight to secure the equal rights of members of those communities, and it really gets my goat to see things like the provincial government taking recognition of trans lives out of our sex ed curriculum. It gets my goat to see, the Alberta government kind of taking swipes at gay straight alliances in schools. And, those are things that we really need to be careful and vocal about speaking up on, especially at this time of year when we're celebrating and also remembering a lot of the struggles of these communities that have gotten us to where we are today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that, Pam, and thank you for your contribution, which was wonderfully diverse and wide-ranging today. And we're so grateful to have you as a guest. I don't know if anybody else can have done it better than our eclectic podcast today. So thanks so much. And I think that we might talk to you again sometime. So in this sense, as we always say, we say talk soon, but I think that especially we mean it for you. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, Darlene. Well, that ends it on this very special, I'll call it Raptors Friday.
Okay, talk soon.
Have a good one.
You too.
That's it for this week's episode of LLP. Thanks to Inter Alia Law for presenting the podcast and to Nick Fowler for composing and performing our music. See our show notes for his website. Don't forget, we love feedback. Please comment in the review section or subscribe or like. We'd appreciate it greatly. That's it. Talk soon.